Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you all on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Tennessee. So delighted to have everybody here to hear about this important topic and to turn it over to our distinguished panelists. But before I do, I want to remind you that that you need to be mute so that we don't get background noises during the conversation. So I will now turn it over to you all.
Thank you, Debbie. Good morning. Welcome to this collaborative webinar with the League of Women Voters of Tennessee and the National Coalition of 100 Black Women Incorporated of Greater Knoxville, Restoring Voting Rights in Tennessee. On behalf of NCBW Greater Knoxville President Dolores Mitchell, I bring you greetings. The National Coalition of 100 Black Women Incorporated of Greater Knoxville's mission is to provide leadership and to promote equity in all areas of African American women through specific methodologies within an African American community in the Greater Knoxville area and including surrounding counties. We will achieve our mission and vision by researching and developing innovative programs focusing on health, education, and self-empowerment. The NCBW of Greater Knoxville is a voluntary association of women, the purpose which is to foster principles of equal rights and opportunities, to promote awareness of Black culture, to develop the potential of membership for effective leadership and participation in civic affairs, to take action on specific issues of local and national importance, and to cooperate with other persons and organizations to achieve mutual goals. I am Paula Brown, Chair of the Public Policy Committee with NCBW, and I will moderate the conversation this morning. At this time, we have a welcome from our co-sponsor, the League of Women Voters of Tennessee.
Thank you, Paul. I'm Kathy Greenberg, and I'm the coordinator of the statewide initiative of the League of Women Voters for Restoring Voting Rights. As many of you know, the League is a nonpartisan volunteer organization that encourages informed and active participation of individuals in government. And we also advocate for public policies and promote civic engagement. As part of our commitment to make sure that all eligible voters have the right to vote, we are beginning this statewide initiative. And today we want to focus on why is Tennessee ranked 49th? And what is it that goes on in our state? What is our actual process that Joy Radice will cover? And then Angel Romero Bowman will talk about her own experience and how she never gave up in getting her rights restored. And Yvonne Webb will talk about the work that she does firsthand in helping people to get their rights restored.
And at this time, before we proceed, I have noticed that our president for NCBW Greater Knoxville is on the webinar. Dolores Mitchell, would you wave and say hello? Thank you. The structure of the conversation will be as follows. Each panelist will have a requested 10 to 15 minutes to introduce themselves and share experiences and information on restoring voting rights in Tennessee. We will give the panelists a 3 to 5 minute warning. We encourage participants to post questions and comments in the chat. After the panelists speak, there's a 30-minute designated time for questions and answers. Our panelists will speak in the following order. Kathy Greenberg, coordinator of League of Women Voters of Tennessee. Restoring Voting Rights, Joy Radice, Associate Professor of Law and Clinical Programs for the University of Tennessee, and Associate Professor of Law at the University of Tennessee and Knoxville College. Yvonne Webb, Knox County Community Organizer and Volunteer, and Angel Romero Bowman, Tennessean who never gave up on voting right to get her voting rights restored. At this time, our first panelist, Kathy Greenberg, will speak.
Thank you, Paula. I am going to share the screen so you can keep up with some of the data that I'm going to be presenting. And let me get this on. I have to move that. Okay. Some of the statistics I'm going to be sharing with you come from this article published by the Sentencing Project. Every 4 years, they publish research in a report written for the public just before the presidential election. And so in October of 2020, they published this one, and we will be putting the link to that full report in the chat. I want you to know that it is about the United States as a whole, but includes information on each state. So what I have done is pull out what's relevant to Tennessee and just why in the world, how in the world did we get to be 49th in the ranking of all the states? I really think we should be ranked 52nd based on what I know. So let's start first with the increase in the people in the United States who are incarcerated. In 1962, that was about 200,000 people. In 2020, it's about 2 million people. Today's not the time for us to go into how and why that all changed, but I think we've heard about it in the news for a long time, and we have some pretty good ideas about that. So let's then look at the percent and ratio of citizens that are disenfranchised. In the United States as a whole, it's about 1 out of 44 people that have been convicted of felonies. In Tennessee, and let's see where, yeah, it's 1 out of 13. Ouch. Not 1 in 44, but 1 out of every 13 people cannot vote in our state due to a conviction of a felony. So in Tennessee, that's just a little over 9%. There is one state that has more, and that's Mississippi, at a little over 10% of its citizens. In Alabama, it's a little lower than Tennessee with 8.94%. Hawaii, however, has 0.48% of its people disenfranchised. And that's not just because they're better citizens and don't get arrested for a felony or convicted of a felony, but it has to do with the process that's used and the rules that apply, and each state makes their own. Maine and Vermont, 0%. How can that be? They don't take away voting rights at all. And then a very troubling one that we need to look at is the African Americans disenfranchised compared to non-African Americans. So in the US, about 1.7% of non-African Americans are disenfranchised. African Americans is 3 times greater at 6.5%. Tennessee and Wyoming, of all places, if you don't know, there are very few African Americans that live in Wyoming, but over 20% of African Americans are disenfranchised, and that's 12 times greater. Well, in actuality, most states do have a more equitable system and situation because only 7 states have more than twice the national average. And of course, we are one of those. If we look at the number disenfranchised in Tennessee and the number with voting rights restored, we see something rather startling. currently, or at least as of October of 2020, there were 360,103 Tennesseans that, after being convicted of a felony and paying their debt to society, which could include time in prison and or parole and probation. But since 2016, only 3,415 have been able to restore their rights. When we move on to other panelists, I think you'll be able to see just why that may be. Here is a map that was actually published on the website of Think Tennessee. If you don't know about them, I heartily recommend that you look. They take on many issues in Tennessee, and restoring voting rights is one of them. And so the map comes from there. So it's a little bit outdated with just a few changes in a few states. But basically, the information that's shared on the right part of the screen is what exists today in the sentencing project. And that really hasn't changed that much. There may be one or two states that are different here. And I don't have the latest report from the sentencing project did not include a map like this. So let's look. You see two states in the upper right, Maine and Vermont. People never lose their right to vote. So they're that orangey color. And then you see the next shade, the first shade of red, 12 states, they automatically restore rights after release. You finish your prison sentence and you're back to being able to vote, and other civil rights as well. But 25 states automatically restore rights only after someone completes probation and parole. And 11 states, like Tennessee, including Tennessee, I should say, have additional requirements. Most of these have to do with financial obligations, paying court costs, and some other kinds of financial obligations that Joy will probably discuss with you. From a national perspective, the majority of Americans support restoration of voting rights. They think this is a good idea. There are many reasons why that I won't be going into any detail on today, except to say that when someone has their civil rights restored, including the ability to vote, they tend to be better citizens, and they have a much better chance of getting a job and of feeling like they're a part of society, and therefore recidivism goes down for those people. In the past 25 years, 50% of states have changed laws and practices to expand voting access for people convicted of a felony. And that includes 9 states that have made changes since 2016 that are reported in the article and the link that you will be receiving. Nearly 3 million Americans had their voting rights restored from 1997 to 2018. That's the latest data I have at the national level. And 13 states eliminated lifetime voting bans and or expanded rights after completion of sentences. I should say we're talking about most felonies, not all felonies do require. Now, based on this, where Tennessee stands in relation to other states and where we stand in not assisting people in an equitable way to get their rights restored, we want this statewide initiative to include much more than League of Women Voter members. We would like for you, your organization, or you as an individual to join with us in making the difference. Our goals include education of ourselves, of people wanting to restore their rights, of others who want to assist in that process. But it also includes outreach, which is a way to let the public know just where we stand and to consider that perhaps we need to be making a change. And then we want to do advocacy, something the League has long been involved in actually talking with legislators and even helping to write some bills or influence the bills and give feedback on them. Potential and current partners, we want a lot more. The University of Tennessee Legal Clinic is certainly one. They are going to be posting a website in mid-January that will contain lots of information where a person who wants to restore their rights or a volunteer who is assisting them can go in and the person can click yes or no or whatever is appropriate out of the list of a very complex things that make a difference in how the process applies to you, and then they can get more information. The National Coalition of 100 Black Women of Greater Knoxville chapter have joined us. We hope others across the state will do so too. One Knox Legacy, we have met with them and are excited about the work going on there, particularly staying in touch with Yvonne Webb. The Campaign Legal Center, you may know about, does many things on national issues. They're a national organization. They have a restoreyourvote.org that provides some very valuable information, including a manual to assist people and volunteers helping them to understand the Tennessee process. And I'm going to make that link available on chat as well. Freehearts.org is well known in Middle Tennessee and beginning in other parts of the state to provide direct service. They do a lot of training to help volunteers be ready to provide service. And they also have been able to get funding to help pay some of those financial obligations. We want many more to join us. There's a critical need in Tennessee to understand the Restoring Voting Rights process, because each county does it a little bit differently, even though the law says it should be done in certain ways. But we don't have a standardization of the documents that are needed to confirm that a person has is qualified to apply and that they have met their financial obligations. So each county is a little bit different. And what we want to do is to collect information through a survey that will be done with phone interviews of the 3 agencies in each county that are engaged in the process. The administrator of elections or other staff members in larger counties that take this role on, the county court clerk, or in larger cities in Tennessee, the criminal court clerk and or other staff, and parole and or probation officers as are relevant. So we have a list of questions. And first, let me just say that we're planning to conduct this in early December, knowing that most people get real busy by middle December, but then also in January and February, perhaps on cold, rainy days when at home, people can help out with these interviews. I'll put this into chat, but we want you to email Marcy Massey Cox, who will then provide more information and a chance to sign up to participate in a training session. We do require this for several reasons. We don't want state agencies to think that we are just trying to investigate and write all the wrong things in Tennessee. Instead, we want to offer support and we want to know just how that system is working. And from this information, we'll be able to create handouts that could be helpful, that they may want to pass out themselves. And we'll go on to the UT Legal Clinic website that's going to be posted. So the volunteer will then need to record responses and return survey responses, and more information will be provided. We plan to do training in a very flexible way to meet people's needs. And we want that to be no more than 10 days prior to interviews, because there's some legal implications about how surveys are conducted that we want to be sure everybody understands and follows the script in order to ensure that we do this in a very positive and legal fashion. So I'll just conclude by saying it's really not about crime. It's about helping make democracy work for everyone. My belief is that in Tennessee, we aren't doing that right now, and we need to make some changes. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy, for sharing that very important information and the statistics for Tennessee. It really does create a better focus for us as we continue this conversation. Next, we have Joy Radice, Associate Professor of Law and Director of Clinical Programs for the University of Tennessee in Knoxville College. And so Joy, you have the mic.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. This is so exciting to be here with all of you. This is a topic near and dear to my heart because I feel like that voting is so fundamental to our feeling of inclusion, our feeling of moving past the stigma of criminal convictions. And so I'm going to start my slideshow by just starting out with some of the wonderful people who are going to be a part of this presentation and saying that I think first and foremost, anything that we do in line with our voter restoration, improvement, reform, getting people to vote has to start with us, the community, and we can't do it individually alone. And so I just love Ms. Brown, who you brought together, and the fact that there's even more, so many more people on this call who are interested. So with that said, it's a problem in Tennessee. Kathy told you how big of a problem it is. She told you where we fall amongst all the states. We're one of the worst. Look at this graph. Think Tennessee was an organization that Kathy referenced. I love them as well. The data they've created for us to be able to understand better what our statute is and how bad it is relative to other states has been phenomenal. But just take a look. I'm not going to walk you through this, but just take a look at the complexity of determining whether or not somebody can restore their right to vote. When I train my students in thinking about this statute, it takes me more than one class time for sure to get them through the nuances of several statutes. It doesn't have to be that way. And I want to start out by saying that the states that Kathy described that have 0.5 and 0%, they don't make it this difficult. And I have to say that it raises a question for me about why we do. Why, once somebody has served their time, has served their commitment after a felony, why are we saying that it should be this difficult to restore their right to vote? So I have to start with the answering that based on the Supreme Court, 1974. Richardson v. Ramirez is what set the stage. The Supreme Court said in its majority opinion that you can disenfranchise people based on a crime, and it doesn't violate the Equal Protection Clause. And so when you look at Section 2, which is this third bullet point down here, it says when we're looking at the right to vote being denied, you can't abridge it. You cannot abridge it in any way except for participation in rebellion or other crime. And it is that language in red that is kind of the foundation for how states can do this in the first place. Because I will tell you, my first question as a student of this subject was, why are we even doing this? And the Supreme Court said the Constitution allows it. Not everybody, though. Marshall and Brennan dissented, and I want to point that out because I find this to be the most powerful statement in the entire set of opinions written in this case. The process of democracy is one of change. Our laws are not frozen into immutable form. They are constantly in the process of revision in response to the needs of a changing society. The public interest, as conceived by a majority of the voting public, is constantly undergoing re-examination. The ballot is the democratic system's coin of the realm. To condition its exercise on support of the established order is to debase that currency beyond recognition. And that is what Marshall and Brennan joined together to say it's actually a violation of equal protection to deny somebody the right to vote based on a felony conviction. Definitely in the way that many states do. But where does this start? It starts with the fact that we have a proliferation of criminal records. And I'm not going to belabor this point, but I want you to look at one of my clients. I redacted her information, but one of my clients' criminal records. These are really difficult to read. Many of my clients are not even sure what they were convicted of to be able to know whether or not they've lost their right to vote. So the first question we have to ask is, has somebody even lost their right to vote? Only felony convictions trigger that lost. This individual, based on what I'm showing you, only has misdemeanors. If you look at the description, these are all dismissed cases, y'all. That means that not only is there no conviction here up until right here, this simple possession, but all of these cases, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, over 10 cases, when I show you the rest of her record, can be expunged. So there are a number of statutes in Tennessee. Expungement's one of my loves as well. I'm not getting into it today, but let me tell you that this woman was able, with our help, not only to restore her right to vote, but also remove so many of these charges from her record, which when it comes to getting a job, when it comes to a landlord looking at your record, it makes a difference. And so this is the back end of her criminal record. Again, you see a series of dismissals, all that can be removed. Then under the dark line, this is how Knox County prints out its criminal record. You are going to see felony convictions. This felony conviction, declaring her infamous, is what ultimately triggered her loss of her right to vote. So I just wanted to start with a concrete example so you know that one of the biggest hurdles is just trying to figure out with the person that you're talking to, did you even lose your right to vote? And what could we do to help you? Okay, so what can we do to help you? We're going to talk about 3 things that we can do to help you. 1, voting rights restoration. 2, petition for restoration. 3, certificate of employability. Voting rights restoration. I'm really big on pictures. This is a student helping a client. That is for voting right restoration. That's all you need to do is help somebody. There's no court involved. There's no discretion by a judge. You just have to figure it out and fill out paperwork. Miss Yvonne's going to explain to you how that is not as easy as I just described it. But essentially, when you're talking about the certificate of restoration, you are talking about helping somebody one-on-one to actually send to the Board of Elections the certificate that they need to restore their right to vote. So there is a statute. There's actually a series. Remember, I told you my students have to parse through all these statutes. I'm not going to get into the weeds with you. I promise I will not bore you today. But basically, this code, we want to look it up. It's 4029, 201 to 205 is the portion of the code that restores the right to suffrage. And it gives it sketches out the way in which people can determine whether they can get their right restored and what the process is for doing that. And one of the things that I'm going to point out later, even more so, is that you have to be finished. You have to be finished with your felony sentence. Probation, parole, everything has to be complete. All restitution has to be paid. And after 2010, which is significant because depending on what timing, the timing of the felony, you will have differences in how this applies to different people. But you have to pay all your court costs unless we can get them waived because you're found indigent. And then you also have to pay, or you have to be current in child support obligations. So you don't have to pay it, but you have to be on a payment plan and you have to be actively paying. That is one of the humdingers of Tennessee's structure that makes us 49th in the state. The only state in this country that places child support as an obstacle for whether or not you get your right to vote. So in terms of the process, there is a certificate I'm going to show you that has to be filled out. It has to be issued by the incarcerating or supervising authority, which can be, as Kathy said, a court clerk. You have to give notice. You're supposed to, under the statute, be given notice. So somebody with a felony conviction, and I personally refuse to call people felons. I know it's really common, it's really easy to do, but I feel like that word embodies defining somebody by one or a few things that happened in their past. So a person with a felony conviction that is being released is supposed to be told about this right to vote. Many of my clients were not told. And then you have to submit the certificate to the Election Commission. Let's pause here. There are people who are permanently barred in Tennessee. That's also what makes us one of the worst states in the country because not everybody can get their voting rights back. So the people with felonies prior to 1986, there's a whole schema that's different that we have to look at in the law. And if you have somebody before 1986 that you want help with, I will help you. But there's an entire different structure of analysis that goes for somebody before 1986. From 1986, we just said, the legislature just said voter fraud, treason. Okay, and voter fraud, I'm going to disenfranchise someone maybe, but still, come on. Voter fraud, treason, murder 1, and aggravated rape. So in some ways, the legislature said the worst of the worst types of crimes. And I know many people convicted of many of these things who I still want to restore their voting rights because they reintegrate and they get out of prison and they're changed humans. So, but at that point, that is all we said. In 96, the state legislature of Tennessee said, okay, now any degree of murder or rape. And now after 2006, we have our most expansive bar, which is any felony sexual assault, any out-of-state offense with a minor. So it includes all, so we're adding, I want to make sure that's clear. We start with this small number of 4 and then we grow. And that's where that huge chart starts to come into play because you have to figure out based on the year of the most recent conviction, where they fall in the bar. So once you find out, but look at those crimes. Those are very serious crimes. I can tell you that the 99% of my clients have not been convicted of those felonies. And so guess what? I can tell them they all get their right to vote back. And that's an exciting moment. Except, and this was one of my most heartbreaking moments with one of my first clients, because I didn't understand that we barred somebody for child support, except if they owe court costs, and except that, thank you, Ms. Brown, except if they owe court costs, and except if they owe child support. And so this is by far the easiest part of the process. Ms. Yvonne's going to tell you how she walks people through it and how you have to have certified copies of each judgment for any felony, only their felonies, and you have to show costs are paid. There's a form that the person doesn't even fill out, but that the authorities that I described before that the statute outlines, they fill out the entire form for every felony conviction. So once you provide them information about the judgments, once you provide them information that you paid restitution and court costs and that you're up to date with child support, this is the form that's submitted by the issuing authority or the supervising authority that allows them to, that allows the election commission to say, okay, I'm restoring this right to vote. What happens if you register to vote and you didn't know that you were barred? You get a note in the mail from the election commission now that says, with a checkbox next to, there's a series of things, and it's a checkbox that just says, it actually says like, here's how you do it. Here's who you should go to in your county. And so that is one thing that they will not, the election commission will not register somebody if they have a felony conviction, but this is the process the person then has to go through. And that's kind of the top part of the form. So I spent the most time on the certificate because I think it's the easiest, it's the fastest we can get somebody's voting rights back. But it's not, Tennessee has 2 vehicles to get your voting rights back, which is super unusual too, and makes it complicated and hard for people to understand. So I'm not going to spend as much time on the next 2 pieces, but I want you to know about it. There's also a petition for restoration. The value of the petition over the certificate is that it restores your entire civil rights, your right to serve on a jury, your right to run for elected office. And so when you have a felony conviction and are declared infamous, there's several civil rights. That petition, the certificate process that I just described to you only gets you back voting. But the petition for restoration, which is a court process, it can be denied, it is discretionary. So again, you're starting to see it's harder. You have to give notice to the DA, 20 to 30 days notice. They have an ability to present information. And what's the criteria? What is the judge ultimately looking for? The judge is looking for the fact that the petitioner has sustained character of honesty, respectability, and veracity. And so for those clients that I have right now, and we're just starting to do this in the clinic, you are basically putting together a packet of, I think of it as a packet of rehabilitation for this person. I'm going to show you, judge, that this person is a changed person and they deserve they deserve to be restored to all those civil rights and not be a second-class citizen. And that's why I have this picture. So the first picture you could do by yourself. This is Judge Thomas. You need Judge Thomas. You need a judge to appear before and to make that argument with your client. And the burden of proof is satisfactory proof of good character. We're not talking about overwhelming amounts of proof. And that part I do love of this statute. That is something we can do. I'm going to skip past this. Once you are approved, you get an order granting restoration of citizenship. It looks like this. And Tennessee has created an additional piece. So when you're talking about our petition, you're talking about all your civil rights. In addition, there's also a certificate of employability. The statutes and the application in court go together, and you can apply to ask a judge. So that same judge, you can say, Judge Thomas, can you also give this person a certificate of employability? That is not what this session's about. If I can come back and do something just on certificate of employabilities, but I want to put a pin in it because Tennessee is one of the only states with this ability. And for people with felonies who can't get them expunged, the certificate of employability helps them get employment licenses, and it helps private employers. It encourages them to hire somebody with a felony conviction, because that certificate says to that employer, you aren't as at risk of negligence in hiring lawsuits, because it creates a rebuttable presumption. I know that's a lot. Just put a pin in it and know that certificates of employability are a brand new statute. They're only a few years old. Very few have been filed. And I'm excited to help people get them because I think that it could really help people with felony convictions get jobs. And then all I wanted to, in addition to say to you, is that there are some cases that I won't go into great detail about that say, when you file for that petition, you should get all your rights back. A judge can't pick and choose. I love Colby Campbell. In terms of State v. Black, we can't withhold the right to hold public office if we're restoring somebody's civil rights. That goes with it. And so you have to restore everything. And then this is the one. So of the three, this is the Tennessee case that I am sad about, because under Johnson v. Bredesen, lawyers thought that they'd be able to fight the child support violation. And the Supreme Court of Tennessee said child support, that rule does not violate the Equal Protection Clause. But excitingly, Kathy talked about our Tennessee litigation. I can talk more about that in the question and answer. We're not doing this uniformly. There is a due process question, in my opinion, and I think that the court has to take a look at it. And I'm super excited about the class action that has been filed and about the fact that we have two challenging this statute because it is so horrendous. Can it work? Yes, it can. In North Carolina, judges ordered the restorations for thousands of people with felony convictions and restored their voting rights based on an unfair and unconstitutional statute. So do I have hope? Yes, I do. And so with that, I want us to help our clients. I want Ms. Yvonne to talk to you about the fact that we were able to hold a successful event. We were able to do outreach in the community with our students. We got on the radio. We were able to marshal, look at all these students working to help people restore their voting rights. We were able to reach out into the community and talk to community members about it. And ultimately, we did this fabulous Facebook Live that really brought us all together and talked about what this law is, what it can do, and how it can help people. And so with that, I just want to end by saying thank you so much for having me here. I have a ton to say. I'm very passionate about this topic, and I am excited about the conversation.
And thank you, Joy. And I had no idea of the hoops and the loops that are involved, and knowing that we as just regular citizens can actually support and help others restore their voting rights. We did have one request for you to share the graphic that you opened with everyone, or the slide. And then we did have a request to define felony, that murder should not. I think that was a comment, but do you want to add anything to that comment, Joy?
Sure. So in terms of felony, you are anything that is subjects a person to over a year-long incarceration. So 1129 is what we call all misdemeanors. So anything that exposes you to loss of liberty, putting you in a state facility, in a local facility for under a year, is a misdemeanor crime. Anything that's over a year, which is a number of crimes, now we have triggered felonies. Although I will say that most people their criminal records have misdemeanors and not felonies. So I've had clients who think they can't restore their right to vote, or they can't vote, and all they've ever had was a misdemeanor. So they could have registered to vote. Tell me again. Oh, if an individual committed a crime in another state, yes, they can. And we apply our statute. And this is one of the other cases. So I'm super excited, Ms. Mitchell, that you asked about that, because you can. But the Tennessee has actually said that the court cost obligation and child support obligation still apply to you, even if in your state. So a ton of people in Virginia got their right restored by a governor. I don't know if you guys remember that. It was a really historic moment where the governor just restored people with felonies their right to vote back. And people living in Tennessee who got their right restored in Virginia are fighting to get their right restored here because they still owe court costs in Virginia. So although Virginia doesn't care about it, we do. Query. So that's the other Tennessee case that's going up, because that we argue, or the lawyers argue. I'm not a part of that lawsuit. I wish. The lawyers are arguing that it is a violation of the Constitution as well.
And Ms. Pearl, we're going to hold your question until after we have heard from Ms. Yvonne Webb, the Knox County Community Organizer and Volunteer. She may answer that question for you. And if not, we will come back to it. Yvonne, I think it is your time. I think you're on mute, Yvonne.
I'm sorry, I'm just learning how to work this mute button. Can everybody hear me okay? All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Yvonne Webb, and I am a community advocate for restoration of voting rights in the Knoxville community, Knox County community specifically. I have worked with such grassroots organizations such as, well, number one, my good friend over at the League of Women Voters, Ms. Greenberg. She's my buddy. We work together and talk quite often about these different issues that's going on with voters' restoration rights. And I've also worked with One Knox Legacy Coalition, and I've just been recently introduced to Knoxville Community Step Up is another good organization. I am a member of Overcoming Believers Church. We have had several forums in the past that we've hosted, different forums that talk about restoration of voting rights. And just to tell you, I just try to be the liaison between the applicants that I get affiliated with and the system process and my good friends over at the UT Legal Clinic. So often in my process, and this is my process, there are opportunities that I am given to go around, and what I try to do is get people, number one, registered to vote. Number one, I started out with just getting registration tables around the city for different opportunities that I knew about. And typically what happened was out of 5 people, at least 2 of the people could not register to vote, or they felt like they had things on their record that would not allow them to register to vote. So I knew that this was a problem. So I kind of checked into it, and the process that I came out with was, if I take them through the process normally is I get the application. They tell me all about their conviction record, what county it was in, what the conviction was. And I then take that to the Knox County Court Clerk's office. They investigate to see if there are outstanding restitution costs or court costs. If there are no court costs, there is no balance or anything, any financial amount that's owed. It's pretty well cut and dry. I then take it to the corrections officer over on Elm Street, and he goes through and writes up the affidavit that Joy showed you. And that then is taken to the Election Commission, and they are given a certificate of restoration for their voting rights. And at that time, the Election Commission then takes all that into account and mails them a voting card. Now, that is the best case scenario. Where it gets complicated is if there are outstanding restitution costs and court costs. That's where it gets complicated. And that kind of left me at a point where I could not help them move to a higher level. So the good thing about the partnership with UT Legal Clinic is I then am able to talk with Joy and her staff at the UT Legal Clinic, and she assigns whoever she needs to have investigate what goes on in the particular case, because it can get complex and it can get to a point where, you know, it's a real scary thing for these applicants to open up and say, I had something on my record. I have a history of conviction in my past. That's something that's very scary for them. So I feel like I'm sort of like, they call me the auntie. I kind of like hold their hand and say, I know this looks scary. This process is something that you rather not go through, but you have to hold on and go through to the very end if you want to get your voting rights back. And that is not an easy thing for most applicants to deal with, because they have fears, number one, of being strapped with something that maybe was long ago and that might reappear. So I kind of have to, I feel like my job is to be a liaison between them and the legal clinic. And the guys at the legal clinic, Joy and Wendy and all the students, are so helpful supporting me to help support the applicants as they come through and are going through this process. So I know that right now, our last event, we worked the June 10th event, and there were a couple of applicants that we're still working on. One applicant, these applicants can have convictions from years ago. I mean, I'm working with, just to give you a little bit of what I'm working with, a gentleman that had some convictions back in 1996. That just goes to show you how long ago some of these convictions can be. And he has done everything that needs to be done. He has no outstanding court calls. So we're walking him through the process. And that has taken a little bit of time, but I think where I come into play is that I kind of build a relationship with the applicants. I talk to them to let them know that we have not forgotten about you. This may take a little bit of time because, as Catherine explained in the beginning, some of these cases are so old, things are archived. I mean, it's a process to go back in and redig all the information that that's required. It takes time. And so I feel like I'm that person that says, hang in there. I'm that little cheerleader that says, hang in there. Everything's going to be all right. And just hold on. We're going to get to the end of this. So that's it, typically, is what I do. And I'm just an encourager. I encourage people that, yeah, you did your time, you paid your dues. And but this is something that our state requires us to do. And if that's a requirement, then we just got to hold on and go through the process and work it to the end. And that's very uncomfortable most of the time for all the clients. I won't even say a portion of them. Everybody feels uncomfortable going through this process. But I know that it's something that if I can help somebody along the way, that's my mission. So also at my church, I have asked that as an outreach church, we try to outreach to the needs of the people in the community. So I do have a special Gmail account that anybody that needs help, that I can put that, and I'll put that in the chat line. Then if you know of anybody that needs help on getting their rights restored, their voting rights restored, just email me and we'll start the process. And with Joy and the legal clinic and with Catherine, and I feel like partnerships need to be developed. And I'm so glad to meet this wonderful woman with the 100 Women's, I'm sorry, I'll mess up your title. I don't mean to, but partnerships are essential. And I feel like once we know what everybody's going in the same direction, we need to network and know what each other's doing so we can be more of a force to help in this very, very, very helpful cause of getting people their voting rights restored. So at that, if anybody has any questions, they can ask me. I know I feel like I've been rambling on, but that's my mission in a nutshell.
Thank you, Yvonne, and we appreciate the advocacy of your organization also. And just as Yvonne has said, it does take a village. So I want to encourage you. I think links have been added for you to participate in the questionnaire, the phone interviews, and also additional links were added for resources. And also we will be, I think there was a question about advocacy groups in Chattanooga, possibly. Yvonne, I don't know if you have a similar organization in Chattanooga that supports, or do you know of any?
At this time, I don't know of any at this time, but I'm always open to know how to extend, our mission and get it out into other places. So I'm open to that. I don't know of any at this time.
And I do think that we did mention through the League of Women Voters of Chattanooga, we may be able to identify, certainly.
Right.
Other
Right. Catherine normally keeps me updated on that, so I'm sure she'll keep me updated on that.
Okay. And continue to put your questions in the chat. And finally, we will hear from Angel Romero Bowman, a Tennessean who never gave up on her voting rights.
Well, almost good afternoon, everyone. So glad to be a part of something so important, something so passionate for me, and something just, it's something we have to do. My name is Angel Romero Bowman. I am a 44-year-old woman, mother of 4, and also convicted felon. I am here today to share my story with you guys. And I won't get into a lot of my personal story, which is an open book, but I will say that with my life came a lot of decisions that I made and a lot of choices that I made as a young woman. At the age of 18, I caught a charge, and then I was convicted of that and found guilty in 1999. And so I was sentenced to 16 years on probation. So in October of 2015, I completed my sentence on probation, 16 years. And so a lot of time had went by. At one point, I didn't care so much about my voting rights. At that time in my life of being a young lady, I didn't care about my rights to vote. But then as I grew older and matured, changed my life, had children, and then I wanted to become a homeowner and I wanted to vote. But there were challenges. It wasn't that easy. Ms. Vaughn and Ms. Joy, they will let you know it's a process and you have to stick with it. So I never gave up hope because I wanted my voting right back. It was my God-given right, and I was gonna fight and do everything to get it. But as a young man on here actually just asked the question of, can someone have court costs that they weren't aware of, and then that get brought up when you're digging into your criminal past, and then can someone go to jail? Those are real fears. That was my fear. I served my 16 years on probation. I done everything that I was supposed to do, and so to face that 16 years, it was very, very scary. I had finally gotten off probation, and so if I go to ask for my voting rights back, I may stir up some stink, if you will, and then something will come up, and then I'll be put back on probation or maybe even arrested. And then I've got these kids, and now I've got a husband, and now I've got a home, and I've got all these responsibilities. So it's probably best to just not ask for my right to vote back, because something could happen, and then I'll find out that I'm back on probation. It's a very, very scary thing. It's real. It does exist. You're not alone. If anybody out there is thinking that, you're not alone. It's real. But I'm here to tell you, in my city, we have a great group of people that will help you to get your voting rights restored, that can help you go through your cases, to help you go through your convictions, to help you go through everything and not be alone in this process, and understanding the real true fear that comes behind a person like myself requesting our vote to right back. I'm sorry, our right to vote back. So I never gave up. And it took me 5 years though. I was afraid for 5 whole years. I did not ask for my right to vote back until 2020, I think it was, 5 years later. And so I did go through the process, and I did have to go to court. I had to get character letters. I had to go through a lot. And I had to go back up to that same court house in the same actual courtroom where I was sentenced to my 16 years. So all of that was a very scary process. But I never gave up. and now I have my right to vote back. I voted in my first presidential election. I voted in my two local elections. And I mean, I'm very excited. I'm just here today to say that the fear is real, that I'm here to say, don't give up, don't lose hope. It is a process, but with like everything else in life, it's a process. So we have to go through these processes. I'm here to say, I am a convicted felon who was terrified, who got over the fear, who got linked up with a lot of really wonderful people who understood my fear, who understood my passion, who understood my right, and helped me to get that right restored. I'm not going to take up much of your time, but I will answer any questions if there are any. But I just want to say, don't give up, don't give in, take the time, stand strong. It is a process. Your fear is real, but you can do it.
Thank you, Angel, for sharing your story, for giving us hope that the process can work for us all. And we just appreciate you opening up and sharing that information, and for what you're doing for others in the community of Knoxville. At this time, I will, it looks like a lot of the questions were answered in the chat. I'm just looking through now to see if there's anything that has not been addressed, or if anyone has additional questions, if you want to raise your hand or go ahead and turn your mic on and speak, we're open to questions. We're right on time. We have another half hour to go. And ladies, if you can help, okay, we have Robert here. Okay, Robert.
Hey, good afternoon. Thank you for this awesome webinar. I'm representing the Iota Alpha chapter of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated, serving as the keeper of records and sales. I got a last minute notice about this meeting, so I was happy to join. One question I had is, so one of our mandates with the Omega Psi Phi fraternity is voting registration. I heard a panelist mention that, 2 out of 5 when they come up to the table, they kind of skip over because of their past fears. So, say every year we set up a table, how do you, I guess, catch those or kind of bring them in to say, hey, maybe you can't register today, but, let us get your information and see if we could channel your case to someone else that may help, versus them just avoiding the table altogether, if that makes sense.
Robert, hi, I'm Yvonne, and I think I can answer that question, which that's happened to me many times. And let me just say, before that even happens, I can see it on their face, because a lot of people it's like it's a shot to their self-worth, and I can almost see it before they even say anything. But the one thing I can tell you that I do is I kind of I'm a very personable person, so I try to make them feel comfortable in just telling them that, hey, if you fail and if you try and you fail, at least you would have tried. So I try to give them some incentive to just go ahead, start the process, and let's walk it through. And you've got somebody to walk it through with. You won't be alone. And so that's some of the ways that I try to talk to people to make them feel more comfortable in just coming forward. And a lot of people don't like to share that kind of thing, because it's almost like it's something that doesn't make them feel good about themselves. But I try to assure them that, hey, everybody's got something, so don't feel that way. And just do what I can to make them feel comfortable about sharing and about learning about the process and sticking with it, and knowing that if I don't know what to do, I know somebody that does know something to do. So I hope that answered your question.
Ms. Yvonne, can I piggyback? Because I feel like, Robert, the legal clinic was kind of in the position you're in, and then we found Ms. Yvonne. So I think one of the other pieces of it is to find community connections that people trust, I mean, I was just on the phone with somebody on this call, Legal Women Voters, directed to me. They was just like, I don't want to tell anyone about this. Like, I have gone so past this. It was over 10 years ago. I was 20. Like, I don't even want to talk about this. Even calling me was like a hard thing because it made her have to surface all of the stuff that happened so many years ago. And so I think churches, I think community groups, I think places where people feel safe are the places that people go to. And it's really hard to, at least Legal Clinic has found, it's really hard to put up my sign and have people trust the legal clinic. And so I feel like with your fraternity, like that may have that level of trust, but we really struggled. And to me, this underlies like, why do we have a law like this? Why do I want to have to go one by one for Kathy showed you the thousands of people that don't have their voting rights restored? It's impossible.
Yvonne and Joyce, we appreciate your response. And we have Maureen and then Audrey Ramsey next.
And before that, can I just add a little bit to their responses?
Sure.
And that is that Legal Women Voters obviously does a lot of voter registration, but we're going to be trying to get information out through social media, but also in printed form to tell people who to contact, or to let other people pick up for a person who doesn't want to come up and tell you that they've been convicted of a felony, but get that information out. So what I wanted to say is that if your organization or you do this kind of thing or in touch with people, please let us know and we will get that information out to you and let you know as we begin to get all of this processed and available. Already I put in the chat, so I won't repeat it, but you can look and find that both the Chattanooga Legal Women Voters and the Memphis Legal Women Voters have a brochure that walks people through the steps. I encourage you when the UT Legal Clinic's website is open that you go there, because it provides even more information that can't go into the size of a brochure, and help you to understand that and know based on your specific needs. So there are some things available that can reach people when they don't want to talk to you, but I'm so glad that Yvonne and others are out there that can really understand and reach and help people to see the need, to see what they can do.
All right, Maureen.
Yes, I would love to know some detail about the 2 class action suits.
That is a great question. So 2 different lawsuits. One lawsuit is challenging, well, it has a number of constitutional claims, but the one I have been most intrigued by and have started writing about is the due process claim, basically arguing that with so many counties implementing the same statute in so many different ways, people have a lack of due process. And so for some counties making it very easy, for other counties it's harder, and that level of disparity just shouldn't exist. There's also just a notion that Tennessee is not doing a good enough job explaining, especially since there's a notice requirement in the statute, explaining to people what exactly. So the statute in and of itself is not being enacted in the way that it is, at least on its face, written. But the second piece, which is the due process claim, is the one that I think is most significant, and that we can, especially through a survey like what the Legal Women Voters are doing, show the dramatic disparity. Even just figuring out who to go to is often one of the biggest obstacles, even if you know all the rules and the laws and how it applies to you. The second one is the one that I was describing very quickly about Virginia residents, so out-of-state residents who have their right restored, and Tennessee basically saying, if you apply our statute, you can't get your right restored. So although Virginia, and it was a Virginia resident, although Virginia just restored your right to vote, Tennessee is going to say you still have to pay your court costs in Virginia.
So
does that help?
What courts are they in, and when will they be heard?
I'm going to try to, while we're talking, I'm going to try to look up the most recent status, because the last time I looked at them, I must confess, was in September. Give me a second.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Audrey Ramsey and then Angel.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I I think my answers have been answered by Kathy Greenberg. I'm sorry. I was more concerned about in Chattanooga, which is where I am, what partnerships are doing this kind of work now. I've been doing volunteer work with the Chattanooga chapter of the League of Women Voters, as well as the Hamilton County Voters Coalition, and I'm working right now doing a survey with the Equity Alliance organization, which is based out of Nashville, but they have regional offices across the state of Tennessee. And I think that this would be a great collaborative effort on the part of all of these entities to come together to at least raise awareness of the work that you and all of these organizations are doing with regards to restoring voters' rights, and then somehow set up some type of voter registration platform for those people who have the courage to come out and try to restore their rights to vote. They can attend and learn more about the process. So I was just curious as to whether or not the organizations in Chattanooga, Tennessee are pulled together doing this. I do a lot of work when I hear about their projects in Chattanooga. Thank you.
Okay, so can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I wanted to just touch base on the village and what it takes, I believe, for me, I think as a working recipe, if you will, is having like everyone who's on here, this group, but also make sure you have someone that is connected to the community, that's somewhat to be involved, to make sure that that's the help, like Miss Vaughn, someone like myself, that is that connecting piece where someone trusts you. You know, they trust you because they don't always feel comfortable sharing with the attorneys. But for me, for some reason they feel connected, they feel trusting, and they feel like that they can say what they're going through, and then someone will understand. Like me, I'm connected with my church that I've been a member with for 14 years, Open Door Ministry, and also I do a lot of volunteer work in the community. So people know what my past was, people know what I'm doing presently and what I'm aiming towards in the future, and so that they can they feel comfortable because I'm relatable. So I just wanted to say that Miss Vaughn, having people like Miss Vaughn and everyone else on here will get the job done. Because when I came in, I was afraid. And then I went to my Miss Vaughn, and then it needed to go a step further. And then I got put with an attorney. And then we went to the court, and then they walked me through the whole process. I did still have court costs. And so we fought for the court costs to get waived, and they did get waived, because they were old, and also the economic of myself. And so I just wanted to touch with all of that because I've seen those questions about court calls, and also to answer that young man's question about how you get someone to the table.
Okay, thank you. Joy, are you needing more time or?
I'm working on the second one.
That's okay.
NAACP one, I just shared in the chat, the
Okay, great.
complaint that was filed in federal district court. I'm not seeing yet a decision from the federal judge, but
I have one other question that I think I missed in the chat. If a person never served time and they have a felony for marijuana, can they seek expungement?
it depends on what felony they were charged with. Right now, the expungement statute, wow, somebody just gave me a chance to talk about the expungement statute. The expungement statute was just expanded. Very exciting, because now it includes not only E-level felonies, but C and D level felonies. There's a waiting period. Basically, whenever I talk about conviction expungement, so first thing everybody needs to know, all dismissed cases can be expunged immediately upon the dismissal. There's a paperwork that you have to file, but it's not discretionary. No one can tell the person no, get those dismissals off the record. Diversions also Diversions are a specific form of adjudication where you basically have a case dismissed if you comply with certain conditions. If you haven't heard of diversion, I can tell you more about it. We can have a one-on-one. I'll talk to you about it. But diversions also, there's a small clerk fee that can be waived of $100. Diversions also can be expunged immediately. Once we're in conviction land, I tell my students we need more information. We always need to look at the person's record, but the short of it is most misdemeanors and many e-felonies can be expunged after 5 years of your sentence being complete. You can't have any other felonies. So if I have a felony that's more serious, like I have an A-level serious burglary offense or rape, that disqualifies all my other felonies from being expunged. So it's really our expungement statute. I really call it like a first or second offender statute, low-level nonviolent offender statute, because it doesn't allow the breadth that some other states do of expunging specific types of convictions. And so you might think I'm doing the lawyer thing of dodging your question, but the truth is I really have to look at that person's individual record because of the nuances of the statute. But there definitely are some felony drug convictions that can be expunged if there's no other disqualifying convictions in that person's history. Does that help?
I don't see any other hands or any additional questions in the chat. Oh, there is Audrey. Were you?
No, I was just giving Joy a thumbs up as she was defining the different types of felonies. That's where I want to make sure we're absolutely clear. And just quickly, my brother was murdered, and it was a senseless murder. And when I hear about restoring voter rights and felony convictions, I just want to make sure we are clear that we are not talking about restoring rights to murderers. Thank you.
Angel, thank you.
Yes. So Ms. Joy, if the expungement part, if a person has more than 2 felonies, I'm sorry, more than 2 convictions, can they still get expungement?
So we're going to get in the weeds for a second. Miss Angel's totally right. Angel's saying that a max of 2 convictions, the way the statute writes it, you can't have 2 felony convictions as those 2 convictions. It has to be either 2 misdemeanors that are eligible or a misdemeanor and felony that's eligible. 2 eligible felonies are not going to do it. With that said, though, there are 2 other parts of the statute I have to mention just because we're talking in this level of depth. One is there's a part of the statute that said if a set of convictions emanate from the same continuous concurrent event, they're considered one. I've had some jurisdictions saying, so basically I've had clients who have 5 convictions, but they're all eligible. They all happened at the same time, right? Imagine somebody getting pulled over for speeding and they have a couple of marijuana in their car, paraphernalia in their car. They've also perhaps resisted arrest. They might also have a public intox. So they have a series of these convictions. All of the ones I just named are eligible for expungement. The statute allows that to be considered one. But that was before we said we could have more than one. And so now the statute has at the bottom of the statute, it's a very poorly written 27-page statute. At the bottom of the statute, it allows for more than one. I've had some judges, in fact, in Knox County, say that you can't read them together. I personally think you should be able to read them together, and that continuous event with 5 convictions should be read as one, so you could have one other one. Does that help? But it is generally a max of 2. But as soon as I start telling you this, you see why you really need a lawyer to look at your record to be 100% sure. And that's why it's very rare for me to try to answer on the spot conviction expungement questions. And I resist. You see me resisting. Because the other thing that's in the statute, which has not really sufficient explanation, is that moving or non-moving traffic offenses, not defined, are excluded from that count. So imagine somebody who has a simple possession, a public intox on different days, and then they were pulled over once and they have a conviction for not wearing a seatbelt or a conviction for not stopping at the stop sign. The first question is, are those non-moving traffic offenses? I, as the defense attorney wanting the person to get expungement, are going to say those are excluded as moving or non-moving traffic offenses. The statute doesn't define them though, so it's unclear what those are. And then the other two are eligible misdemeanors. And so in theory, we could remove and expunge the two misdemeanors and leave those minor traffic offenses on the person's record, which I don't know that not having a seatbelt, which I've been guilty of, is going to hurt somebody in any serious degree.
I was just asking that because I have a lot of people asking me that and I couldn't explain it to them. And I'm saying, just go for it. Just go for it. Don't let the fear of, well, I've got more than this and I've got more than that, because you'll be surprised once someone looks into your case.
Yes, and we have to pull everything, right? You just need to do the analysis. Have somebody do the analysis for a person with a conviction. If you've had a conviction that's been over for more than 5 years, it is worth it to see, especially since now that the statute expanded, I'm kind of freaking out. There's legal advice I gave 3 years ago that doesn't apply now. And so, I want those folks to come back to me to say, hey, what about now that these types of felonies are actually eligible? And so there's really, as this statute evolves, not only do you have to ask the question, but you have to keep asking the question, because honestly, even though the statute's not perfect, it's getting better and better. And the legislature is allowing us to expunge more and more. And that is in line nationally with what's happening throughout the country, because people's criminal records are really so public and they're holding them back from things that, no matter what side you are on the political line, you want folks to have jobs. You want folks to be able to move forward. You want folks to be able to have a second chance. And that can't happen if the records look that bad and people have a reason to deny you a state license, a barber's license, a cosmetology license. So that, and one of the things that I think I should piggyback on what Kathy said earlier is that I want to be able to tell all of you when the Expunge TN website is launched in January, because in addition to voting rights, it's going to have an ability for somebody to walk through their criminal record and determine whether or not they have a conviction expungement possibility, whether they have dismissals, and help them fill out that form. And one of the things we haven't talked a lot about, but I don't want this session to end without us talking about, is court cost waivers. Different judges feel very differently about court cost waivers, but the statute permits, there's an indigency statute that permits judges, it gives them the power, undeniably, to say that somebody's court costs should be suspended or forgiven. And that ability, we just had a court cost waiver community court 2 Saturdays ago. We waived thousands of dollars so people could get their driver's licenses back, so they could get their voting rights back. And so there are judges that feel very differently about the power to waive or remove court costs. But for somebody who has an argument for expungement or voter restoration, I feel like judges are empathetic and want to help somebody move past those, especially very old court costs. And one of the things that Ms. Yvonne didn't tell you is that one of our clients really believed she paid her court costs, but the jurisdiction's records from 20 years ago are so old, it doesn't show it. And so there are things like that that also happen that make something that should be a process that just takes, a day for somebody to figure out, something that takes us months to work on. And as a result, when you're thinking about, you guys know better than I do, when you have to register to vote to be able to vote. So now you're backing up that process, 6 months, 8 months, so that somebody can hit registration at a period where they then can actually vote, register to vote on time to vote.
Thank you, Joy. I don't see any other hands.
Ms. Brown, Kathy
Yes.
asked me a question in the chat, which is, where can you get legal advice? And I'm sad to say that we're one of the lone rangers in this field, the UT Legal Clinic. And we have this small expungement clinic who unfortunately can't help everybody, which is the impetus for this website, because the hope, and honestly, I believe in technology, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure if the website is going to be able to do all that we want it to do, but I think we need to try, because in terms of providing the level of access to justice and legal information that we hope to provide people, I think there's a chance. And so what we're doing over the next several months is testing it, trying to figure, so to the extent that we can allow you guys access to it, have you give us feedback on it, we know that it has to hit and be able to be used by people with a range of legal knowledge and information and education and reading level, for example, right? Like the website itself has to be written so that somebody with a 3rd grade reading level can actually use it. So my hope, Kathy, is that that website will be a place. But in addition to that, the clinics, the legal clinics, I've heard that Memphis is starting to build a legal clinic at University of Memphis. I love Danny Schaff's in there. He's the clinic director. He's been really interested to do that. I know Vandy's criminal clinic will also have students work on these issues. So don't let the clinics get by you. Try the legal clinics, and public defenders should be able to answer these questions for their clients. In Knox County, the public defender's office does the expungement for people who are eligible. They see that as part of their representation. And so for many clients, they could go back to the public defender that helped them in the first place with their case.
Yvonne, did you have a question or comment?
I just wanted to piggyback on what Joy said about the website is phenomenal. I think we have got to. I love that website because everybody has a phone these days, and with that QR code, all they have to do is just, hold their phone over that code, and it takes them directly into what they need to what information needs to be shared with the UT Legal Clinic. And it's just a phenomenal way to network with the person. And, that way, once they get into that network of information, the Joy and all her folks will have everything that they need so that they can start the process and trying to restore the votes flow. So I'm a cheerleader for the website. I can't wait to January so that it will officially open up. That's all I wanted to say, Joy. I'm giving you your props, girlfriend.
And, we have about 5 more minutes. Let's see. I see Maureen has a question.
I'm sorry to come back again, but just 2 quick things. I've been doing this a while, and like so many other issues, it seems to me that one of the things we need the most is a clearinghouse for information. There are so many organizations working on issues and doing good work, but none of them know about each other. And like I'm in Davidson County, I didn't know Vanderbilt had a legal clinic that was available. And legal aid here of Middle Tennessee and the Cumberlands is also most willing to work on this. But if the league would even think about trying to be a clearinghouse for information, I know Campaign Legal Center has put tons of stuff together nationally and for Tennessee. So has Free Hearts, but we're a lot of duplication of effort going on. And besides that, I just want to thank everybody for the participation today.
And Yvonne, is your hand still up from the last time? Okay.
No, I'm done.
Okay. Well, in closing, I do want to thank all of our panel participants for this very informative session. And for those of you who've given up a UT football Saturday to come and hear this information. And we encourage you to take advantage of the links that were posted in the chat for additional advocacy organizations and opportunities to volunteer to support the restoration of voter registration rights. And lastly, I want to remind you and thank our partner, the League of Women Voters of Tennessee, this session will be posted next week on their link. It's www.lwvtn.org/voter_restoration. And that is also in the chat. And we will try to get a link to that also on the NCBW of Greater Knoxville's website also. And if there are no other comments, Kathy, was there anything the league wanted to say?
Just thank you to everyone for coming. I know over 100 people registered. Debbie Gould shared with me. So I know some will be watching this as a recording later on, and they will get that link, but we will be sharing that with everyone that did register. We'll have a copy of that link emailed to you next week when the YouTube version is ready to go. I don't know about Joy, but I'm guessing, Joy, you're willing to let the slides be shared, and I'm certainly willing to let mine, and you've got in
I think I just put
chat.
it in the chat. Can you tell me if you could see it?
I saw it. Yeah, I saw your email there. Yeah. So yeah, if you want slides from either or both of us, please just let us know. Be happy to share those with you. And thank you everyone for your participation and your interest and your work in helping to restore voting rights.
Thank you.